ER. I'm like, oh my God. Sign me up.
Yeah.
Because I also like honestly, like I'm not trying to about that. It's like I so I really want to see mints.
I know, I thought they were candies at first, but I was like, oh. Hi, how are you? Nice to meet you. Other friend, nice to meet you. Sure.
Anna, nice to meet you too. Nice to meet you.
Yeah.
Do you live in New York? Sorry, you're in New York? No, I live in New York. Okay. That makes things easier. Still, nice of you to travel. Where did you oh my God.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. Whatever you're
I feel like if you guys are like,
You could, I mean.
All right, guys, we're gonna get started. Thank you everyone for coming, and thank you to our Zoom attendees. Tonight we have Dr. Harney from our home institution, and Dr. Green as well from our home institution. We are waiting on one more panelist, Dr. Jankowski. She's from New Jersey City Medical Center, and then we also have Dr. Roberts from Columbia University. So today our panel format is we have a few free-form questions, and then we're gonna open it up to student Q&A. Okay. So if you guys wouldn't mind just giving a quick brief introduction of your journey into orthopedics and where you guys went to school and. Okay. Whoever would like to start.
I guess I'll start. I'm Anna. I'm one of the PGY5s at Rutgers here. I'm originally from Northern Virginia. I went to William & Mary for undergrad, VCU for med school, and then obviously here for residency. I got it. What was it? How did I get into ortho or my journey here?
Your general journey here.
Okay, I think this headed pretty late. I think now now people are getting in like earlier and earlier. I like shadowed an orthopedist in my area in undergrad just because I thought surgery was really cool. I knew I was going to go into medicine. I had no idea really what I was going to do. And I really just rotated through like almost every surgical subspecialty ever when I was in medical school just to figure out what I really liked to do. Because I knew I liked working with my hands and problem solving like in a hands-on way. I just didn't really know like what all the options were. I didn't have anyone in my family who was in medicine. No one knew anything. I just was like contacting my local surgeon like, hey, can I like what is your life like? And then once I rotated through ortho, I really, really loved it. And then I kept rotating through other things. And I didn't love it as much. And then I kept going back to ortho and do these like little 2-week rotations. And I had a really great mentor who's a trauma surgeon for ortho, who really like got me hooked. And then I just kind of took it from there, did like research and ended up applying, and obviously it worked out, thankfully. And that's how I'm here. And I'm currently, I'm a 5. I'm gonna go to Pitt for hand and upper extremity next year.
My name is Heather Harnley. I'm a pediatric orthopedist here at Rutgers, and I've been here for a while. I've been in the same group since 2007. I did my training as a resident here at Rutgers as well. I went on and did a 1-year sports fellowship to follow, and did a pediatric fellowship as well. So I'm in a group of all pediatric orthopedists, but my main focus is mostly sports medicine. I grew up in the Northwest. I grew up in Oregon and Seattle, and then came out here to New Jersey. I never thought I would stay in New Jersey. Our 5-year plan was always to go somewhere else. My husband is also from Washington State, but we live here now, and we live in Princeton and have 2 kids, 13 and 15, so a little further down the road.
And I'm somewhere in between, but I am also from Northern Virginia.
Where are you from?
I'm from Alexandria.
I'm from Fairfax.
No. Wow. Must be something in the water in Virginia. I did med school at Penn State and then found my way to Harvard for residency. I did my hand fellowship at HSS and now I am at Columbia, obviously still doing hand surgery. So I have like a pretty academic practice, but I would say on the day to day, it feels a little bit more like what people would maybe call private-demics these days. So, doing a little bit of research, a little bit of teaching, but I'm, not, don't have like very high research sort of quotas or things like that I have to meet. And I'm about 6 years into practice, so like just sort of starting to get into mid-career.
Could you guys share a formative experience that helped you decide to pursue your orthopedic subspecialty?
I'll start. I remember very vividly, I did med school in Philadelphia at Penn. And so we do all of our clinicals in 18 months, which was more unique then than I think it is now. But so we got to start doing our rotations halfway through our second year. And you kind of make that decision pretty early on if you like your medicine rotations or if you like your surgery rotations. And so I already knew I liked my surgery rotations. And I was doing an ER rotation and a girl came in who had been in a car accident with a dislocated hip. And if you've ever seen how an orthopedic resident reduces a dislocated hip, this guy came like tearing into the ER and he jumped on the table and he grabbed this girl's leg and like wiggled it around and then he jumps off and he's like, I'm done. And I just was like, that is so cool. So that was sort of the moment where I was like, I want to know more about this orthopedic stuff.
That's very. I also had a similar ER experience in med school. I mean, I think I had already kind of decided ortho, but I think what it like really clinched it for me was like a motorcycle accident came in, like one of the legs is over here and like, the whole trauma is going down and ortho is like, cleaning up the legs and everything and figuring out which injuries to tackle first and just like watching that whole experience was really was sort of what clinched it for me that I wanted to go into ortho. I think everybody sort of falls in love with ortho for the trauma.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't think of like a single experience. Mine was very like summative, like a series of like experiences where I was like, this is so cool. And I kept getting drawn back to it. And then we would actually, as med students, like we'd be mostly in the trauma ortho room, but then we did clinic and it was like you saw everybody that you did the surgery on like two weeks prior. And like people were doing so great and they're so great, like thankful and like they were like up and walking. I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. Whereas like not every specialty is like that. You see them in like your follow-up and they're like still really sick or like they're still in rehab, like they're just not like doing as well. But there's a lot of variety. I mean, you treat really sick people, but you also treat really healthy people and like everything in between. So like that, I think it was all of that kind of like led me down the path to ortho.
What does a typical week in your life look like in terms of operative volume, clinic hours, teaching, research, education, other types of responsibilities that you may have?
So I operate 1 to 2 days a week. And in a given OR day, I'm usually doing anywhere from like 6 to 10 cases. Because I can have really short cases that are 10 minutes or a little bit longer cases that are 2 hours. There are hand cases that do take longer than that, but that's kind of like an average, OR day. And then the other days are like days are mostly spent in the office, seeing patients, but I do have like half a day of academic time, to do research or, plan for talks I'm doing or things like that.
I am in the OR 1 day a week and in the office 4 days a week. So peds is definitely more office heavy compared to some other specialties in orthopedics. We have some morning conferences and, but otherwise, they usually start earlier, but the office hours usually start at like 9.
My week is a little bit different because I'm still a resident. I was telling some people that like I wake up at 4:30 right now, and my time that I end the day is like very variable. I'm mostly in the OR 3 days a week, and that varies based off of like what my rotation is. Like I just came off joints, and we were in the OR 3 days, but mostly it's 3 days you're in the OR, And then you have one day where you're in like the office with an attending, and then we have one day of education, which is Thursdays, where the whole morning is like lectures or scope lab or something, or anatomy lab. And then the afternoon is our resident run clinic, where there's no really attending there. It's just sort of like the chief resident, like it's like a top down model, like the chief residents oversee what the junior residents are doing. And then we all kind of like see patients at the same time, and it works out. And if there's any questions, like there's an attending who's like on standby if there's anything that needs to be staffed, or if there's someone needs surgery or whatever. But it's a nice experience for residents to learn sort of like on their own and follow their own patients. And so my days, like my OR days, can end anywhere between like, I don't know, 4 and 8, depending on like what the day looks like. It's just completely variable depending on the rotation and what the day looks like. And then I obviously still take like call, and so depending on my call is pretty nice now, it's like only Q6, so sometimes like I'll have to go in overnight and cover cases and I'm there later, but like my week.
Thank you. What are some misconceptions about ortho that you would like to debunk for students going in? But also, are there any stereotypes or like rumors that have been true for you?
One thing that's definitely not true is that you need to be a big, strong man. I think I get comments, especially because I just came off joints. Literally, one patient a day would be like, "You're so little. You're gonna do my surgery?" I'd be like, "Yes, I will." And like, I think a lot of people are like, we're kind of shocked. Like when I was like reducing hips in the ER, they're like, "You're gonna do it?" And like, I'm like, "Of course, yeah, I'm gonna do it." And like, I think people were kind of surprised. Like, you don't really need to be. It's not just like brute strength, like pulling in any direction. You kind of like think, like, what are you doing? And like, you use your weight that you have in like specific ways. It's not just like you're just yanking as hard as you can in any given direction. So I did, that was definitely a misconception that a lot of people I think still have.
I think most of the stereotypes are pretty true, other than that one. I think, what were those Dr. Glock things of the?
Oh, glaucoma blacking?
Yes, most of those are true. Orthopedists have a reputation compared to every other surgeon of being a little more carefree, like just not being into the medicine and just broken bone, me fix it. And that's not true of every specialty, but I think that's underlying every single orthopedist. Yes, exactly. We just said that earlier.
No, I would agree with that, but I mean, for good reason. I think, you learn like no orthopedics in med school. It's bananas.
Yeah,
You
it really
spend 4
is.
years doing ortho, and I mean 4 years doing medicine, and then you go and do something completely different for 5 years. So
true.
it is hard to hold on to all of that stuff. Which I always tell people, I used to be really smart. I was
Kind of going on that line, because this is women in ortho panel, what has your experience been like just being female in a historically male dominated field? You could do like specific experiences or just general like themes that you've seen. Okay.
I think at least when I was in training between 2000 2005, I think the most pushback I got was from patients. And I still in the office will once in a while, and they're genuinely just asking, "You're my surgeon? Like, I've talked to you, I've met you 3 times and you're my surgeon?" And I keep having these moments like, yes, I am. Yes, I am. And I think the general public often just doesn't always link those two together. So I think that's what has been the most true over the last 20 years for me.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely get patients who keep saying, "So when they do the surgery," and I'm like, we've been treating for like 5 years. Like, I'm the surgeon, right? Like, there's no one else to meet. There's no other curtain. But it's true. You still have to tell people that.
Yeah.
Hi, sorry, I'm Dr. Jakowski, Jackie, sorry I'm late, but that's kind of the nature of the beast, finishing a hip fracture before heading over this way, so apologize for missing the beginning, but happy to be here now.
Welcome.
Yeah, thank you for joining.
Sorry.
No, it's okay, we totally understand. Would you mind just briefly giving a quick introduction of your background, and then we can jump on to the next question?
No problem. So Jackie Jakowski, grew up in Massachusetts, did my undergrad at Holy Cross in Worcester, did my medical school at University of New England, College of Osteopathic Medicine, then have been a lifer at the RWJ Barnabas system. I did my residency fellowship. And now I'm attending in the practice there. I did my fellowship in combined orthopedic trauma and adult reconstructive surgery. So just finished my first year of practice and grinding pretty hard.
So our next question is, do you believe that there are any qualities that are shared amongst successful orthopedic surgeons?
Any qualities?
Like, are
Oh,
there
okay.
specific like patterns and qualities that you guys see in among successful orthopedic surgeons? And how can medical students,
I mean, it's honestly the same things that got you here to start with, like you're hardworking, you show up, you can. I think one thing that probably is a little bit harder to accept as an orthopedist, and again, it's more that surgery divide of just of how you can plan for everything and you can have all the right things, but sometimes you need your plan B, and sometimes you need your plan C, and sometimes you need your plan D. So you have to be very comfortable with what can be very exciting and sometimes tension-filled moments, and you have to be okay handling the stress that can arise in certain moments and be adaptable. I guess that's probably the best word that I can come up with, is just being able to. I think every single one of us probably lean on the OCD's tendency of this scale, and everybody's made their lists and checked everything 3 times, and there's still going to be things that just surprise you, and that's how our bodies work, and that's how people work, and that's how hospitals work, and it's just being able to manage that without blowing a gasket.
I mean, I agree. I think to be a surgeon, a lot of us are pretty type A. But I mean, I think the successful ones are the ones who are really able to keep calm in those very intense moments. You know, there's a word equanimitas, which basically means like sort of being cool under pressure. And I think that's really important for a successful surgeon of any type.
I think, you know, the interpersonal skills, that's huge just for your career in general, you know, outside of the operating room. The operating room itself is a very small part of what we do, and it's how you manage people and your teams and working within the system. Beyond the operating room, that's really going to make or break your career, because people remember how you interact with them and how you talk to them and how you manage the team, and that's really what your reputation is often built on beyond just your surgical skills.
I'm gonna respond just for the perspective, because I'm still a resident. I agree with all of the things that they said. I think what makes a good orthopedic resident is just being really hardworking, which sounds like really like obvious, but like you have to put in the work, and it's like very time consuming, and you're exhausted like 24/7. But you have to be willing to like push past that, and like we have a job to do. We're here to learn. We're also here to help patients, and we're all part of a team. And being willing to contribute to all of those different parts, I think is really important. Is what makes a good resident.
Because that doesn't change when you become an attending,
Yeah.
it becomes worse, actually.
One of my attendings used to say there are 2 kinds of residents. There are residents who make check boxes, and there are bad residents. And those skills will serve you as an attending, because you know, you just gotta get the notes done, or you're gonna get the nasty gram from your boss. It will not stop.
Speaking of residency, what was the most important factor for you in selecting a residency program?
I was just talking to the table that I was sitting at. I think the number one thing that I was looking at. So I was at during the time where we actually did a lot of like everything was in-person interviews. So we spent a whole like day or two, like we did a social in person. We stayed there. So I put a lot of weight into observing interactions at my away rotations that I did, but also like when I was there, like looking at the residents interacting with each other, like where people were sitting, who was talking to who, what they were talking about. And then as well as like the attendings talking to the residents, like were they talking to them? Were they joking? Was it just all business? Like, did they know anything about their residents? And I put a lot of weight into that because I am a very like people-oriented person, and I knew that for my 5 years what was really gonna affect my 5 years is like the people who were there, not like the facilities, like do you get block time, like what the call schedule is like, because like you can have the worst call schedule in the world with the best people and it's totally fine. And you can have the like vice versa, you can have the best call schedule in the world, but if your co-residents or your attendings are like awful, like you're just gonna be miserable. So I put that the most weight when I was making my list and with my checkboxes, my scores that I calculated into there was like the social interaction pile. There was one for residents, like interactions, and then one for the attendings. And I ranked them, and that with a lot of other factors, and there was, yeah, anyway.
And in the end, to be honest, it's not really only your choice. It's not like how you get your college acceptances or your medical school acceptances. It's a match. And so you submit your list and then other people submit their list, and maybe you get your first choice, maybe you get your fourth choice, maybe you don't get any at all. And so that's just the reality of how it actually works. I 100% agree that the people are always going to be ultimately super important. For me, it was also my personal life. It was geography. My husband was still working here in New Jersey, and I wanted to be near him. And this worked out for both of us. And we got married. He was my boyfriend then, so to be honest. But we got married halfway through residency, and were able to live together. And I was able to go home and have dinner with him, and all of that made my life a lot better.
I was single. At the time. So, I mean, I was really looking at sort of the breadth of experience that I would get. You know, I was looking at programs that had, you know, many attendings and, you know, all the specialties. So you would really have a chance of like really great exposure to anything that, you know, you might become interested in. And then I think location definitely plays like a role on sort of what programs you focus within that sort of interest. So I rotated at some programs in New York because that was of interest to me. And I agree, you really also like on your away rotations, observe the interactions. And I definitely saw some interactions that I really liked and some I was a little bit concerned about, which also played a role on my rank list. So it's a combination of all those.
I think almost even going a step before, what helped me a lot was that I was more meticulous about where I was trying to figure out where I wanted to audition or do my away rotations. In the DO world, we called them audition rotations, not aways, because everything was away for us. But so when I was looking about where I wanted to apply for rotations, I tried to find places that prior people from our medical school had matched, so that I had someone to be in contact with that would give you honest opinions. From a female perspective, I wanted to find a place that had accepted women in the past, you know, not that that was going to make or break my decision, but maybe a little bit easier if they already had one and you weren't going to be the first. I left now because I ended up being one of the first in my residency program. So, you know, great ideas, but how it works. And then if you have an inkling of what specialty you might be interested in, obviously don't marry yourself to that. But if there's a program that's a little bit heavier in one specialty than the other, and that was a really good piece of advice that I got actually while I was on audition rotations. I had expressed some interest in trauma, and one of the senior residents had pulled me aside and said, you know, a lot of these programs are not based in trauma centers, so you're not doing your trauma rotation until you're a fourth year, and then at that point it's too late. Or really, if you decide you hated that and now you're applying for fellowships and don't know what to do, then you're kind of out of luck, because you put all the eggs in the basket and you had no idea what you really wanted to do with your life. So things that gave you a lot of early exposure, places that give you a breadth of exposure early on so that you can make those decisions, that was helpful and important to me as well.
So what is your least favorite aspect of orthopedic surgery?
Everybody likes being in the OR. Right. That's the same answer for all of us, right?
Yeah, everyone likes being in the office. Say that again. Everyone doesn't really like being in the office.
Absolutely. Although, you know, I felt it is interesting to watch patients in the office. And I joke that I was always going back and forth between orthopedics and psych, and you never need to do psych because they come to your office in orthopedics more than in trauma. Yeah, so it's, you know,
across the board. Across the board.
That's my own problem. I like to talk to my patients a little bit too much because I just find it fascinating what stories they come up with. It can go very long.
PCP.
Yeah. We end up here.
I think anything you do, ultimately there's going to be a point in your time, depending on what stage you're at in your career, where there's these new phases, and medicine is super predictable. It's one of those weird jobs, like you don't get a promotion. Like you decide what you want to do, you do your training, you do your specialty training, and then you become an attending, and that's what you do, and you continue to do, and you continue to do. And so there's this phase when you're starting off and you're suddenly doing some things you didn't think you would be doing. Maybe your group wants you to be doing something and you're learning how to do something you never had training for. And so there's your first 2 or 3 years as an attending where you're still kind of like, I think I got this. I'm not sure I got that, but I'm pretty sure I got this. And things are still, keeping you on your toes. And then you definitely reach this point somewhere 10 years, 15 years after doing it where you're like, I've done this before. And it's a lot of repetition. And so having that, but that's true of any job. I mean, so I have these sentences I say in the office. I'm like, I think that's like the 27th time I've said that sentence today. I'm just repeating myself over and over again. And that was probably the one thing that I didn't realize 15 years ago that would be just as much of a part of my day as it is. And you just kind of reach that acceptance equipoise moment and move on.
All the clicking through the EMR.
I think that's the hardest part. The hardest part. Surgery is wonderful, and that's what gets you through the complications are really, particularly in surgery. They feel personal.
Don't cause them.
Yeah.
You blame yourself.
Yeah. Even if you're seeing someone else's complications, it's really hard.
They're unavoidable though.
Indeed. And you have to make your peace with that and figure out how to deal with it. And you will. We all do.
Yes, but I just don't have the memory of a goldfish.
My last was so 5.
Okay, so we talked about residency very briefly. Let's circle back. And we wanted to ask about, because this is like a safe and open space, we wanted to ask about any experiences that you've had or any like things that you've had that where you felt like discriminated against or maybe just singled out in any part of your training at all. And how did you deal with it at the time? And looking back on it, how would you deal with it now, if it's different?
Like we were saying before, I think a lot of the discrimination mostly comes from patients still, like people in the hospital, like for the most part, they kind of know who like I am, and I don't feel like I'm disrespected because of like my gender, at least. They hated me because I was an intern or something, but not because I was a woman. But I do remember, like, especially when I first started like taking call, being in the ER and patients, I had this guy who had a trimal ankle fracture dislocation. I did the consult. There's a med student with me that day who happened to be a male. And it was like, okay, this is your diagnosis. Like, this is the plan. I closed reduced him, splinted him, took him to x-ray, talked to him. I had him sign all the consents, which is 4 consents for things. I was like, do you have any questions? And the entire time you're just looking at the male med student who literally didn't touch the patient. It was like an M1, they're a shadowing day. Never said anything to this patient. They looked at the patient and I was like, are you asking something about a question? I was like, I thought he was blind at first. I was like, wait, can he not see me? I was like, oh my God. And then I realized he literally thought I don't know who he thought I was, but he thought this random medical student who's with me for that one day was the guy who's the surgeon who's gonna do everything. I was like, this is really bizarre. I didn't say anything. I was just like, all right, can you sign the papers? Here we go. I'm I probably would do the same thing today. I'm not very I'm your surgeon, you must respect me. But I was just like, this is very bizarre. This has never happened to me before. And I still remember it to this day. I was just like, wow, that actually happened. People actually think that about women sometimes. They don't really think of us as being surgeons. I don't know. It was very bizarre. I would probably do the exact same thing though. I'd just be like, all right, can you sign the paperwork? We're gonna fix your ankle tomorrow.
Just be yourself. That's really the end of the day. Your reputation is being built on your work ethic, and it's maybe this is crass, maybe it is what it is. But if you just like everyone else, I would say this, male, female, otherwise, shut your mouth and do your job, right? That's why you're all there. And, a lot of times, the squeaky wheel gets the oil, as they say, and never that you shouldn't advocate for yourself. Absolutely, if something is wrong, and you should escalate it as you see fit, but we're all here to do a job. We're all here to work together, and you are, at the end of the day, part of a team, and the team works well if everyone understands that. I never had any, issues with that because I shut my mouth, did my job. If I was told I did something wrong, I said, sorry, it won't happen again. And guess what? It didn't happen again. It's very simple ways. None of this is rocket science to survive. It's just doing the right thing. And as long as you do the right thing, you know, you're clinically sound, you had reason for your judgment, you're honest about why you did certain things. We all make mistakes. We're all gonna make mistakes. No one's gonna single you out for making a mistake because everyone does that, but it's, you know, accepting the responsibility and, you know, being a mature adult. And I would expect that of anybody that came through a residency program.
I think the days of truly overt gender discrimination are not really there anymore. Maybe in rare instances. I think what I experienced more in my training and what, you know, as a senior resident, one of the attendings admitted to me was that he was scared to say anything constructive to a female resident, lest it have some sort of consequence on him. And that's what I hear more for trainees these days. You know, I think that's excellent advice, you know, just work hard, do the right thing. Sounds easy enough.
And you survive.
But I think also like being open to constructive criticism. I mean, you're not going to get any better until, you know, until somebody coaches you and gives you feedback. So, you know, do be open to that and try to change that. You know, I think that's the thing holding women back in medicine the most sometimes these days.
You're not, you know, you can have feelings, but you can also accept constructive criticism as long as it's bestowed upon you constructively, you know?
Yeah, I have to admit, I don't know if I have a memory of a goldfish, but I really can't pull out any one specific example of anything that I remember experiencing. I was the only female resident throughout my 5 years that was there, and it was a small group, but I remember like people would know if I had done the reduction in the ER when they went to the attending, because the patient would tell the doctor, oh, that girl did it. That girl did it. And so that was sort of the, yeah, exactly. But yeah, I don't remember anything from maybe some crass jokes now and again and gallows humor, but that's kind of universal. And again, I just feel fortunate that I don't have a story to share.
I think this also goes back to selecting residency, selecting, you know, where you want to do your away rotations. As much as the program's interviewing you, you are still interviewing the program, and you know the match is also technically meant to favor your rank list over the program's rank list. It's obviously it's an imperfect system, but it is what it is. So you will find where you belong, and there, like we discussed, that each program has its own personality, and maybe some of those are more compatible with yours. I think, you know, I certainly found my home, and I laugh that it was my last one, and everyone says, the ones you care about the least, you should put first and last, because your first, you don't know anything, and your last one, you're just exhausted of doing the whole thing. So I feel like it was the first one that I put a smile on every day, let my true personality show, and it turns out that that was where I was meant to be, because it just fit in with all the guys at the time. Maybe a little too well, but that's a different story.
And obviously orthopedics is very demanding field, and you're all very dedicated to the craft. So do you have any advice for people who are concerned about like balancing their work lifestyle with their family lifestyle, or just, you know, doing the process of like starting a family or building a family during your training and your career now?
It's still like in the
By accident. Really hard at managing your time.
I am like so weird about schedules, and I'm the one that needs to know 3 weeks in advance what time somebody's picking up so and who's going to be doing the carpool that day, and it's something that I have found has been the only way to like make all the puzzle pieces work. And I mean, even like in your career, there's different phases of family life, and there's moments when you need some things and there's moments when you need other things, and you do have to just stay adaptable and ask for help. Don't be afraid to take help in any shape or form. Yeah, there's things that you don't get to do, but then honestly, what I have found lately is that I do have more control over my schedule than I thought I did 10 years ago. And even little things like just making sure, no, you know what, I don't want to schedule my last patient at 5. I want to schedule my last patient at 4:30. And that just suddenly gives me this like whole extra hour at the end of the day where I can do things and make it all work. So I think there is more I think that, yeah, I think there are more ways to make it work for you than, you might think there are when you first start out.
I'm not sure when you had your kids, but I insert like a sub question. I get asked a lot, like when should I have kids? Can I have kids? Like, is this even possible? Yes, you could definitely have kids, obviously. And I think the answer is whenever it's right for your family. I mean, more and more, people are having kids in residency. When I was in residency, the first female resident got pregnant. It was like such a big deal. Like, what are we gonna do? But it was fine. And now it's becoming more and more common, and I don't think you should hold back until a certain point in practice. There's never gonna be a good time. Just do it when it's right for your family. It's honestly never, gonna be the perfect time.
I just keep pushing it off. My husband's doing it. So, if anybody else has tips, I'm open to them myself.
But I think that, you're in a time where you can really take advantage of not having kids. So you, like you said, you're grinding and really like, putting in all the extra time. And
We have a calendar. It's a literal paper calendar that my husband keeps on the wall, and he makes me write every day I'm on call at every hospital on it, so we can find that maybe one day of the month or one weekend that I don't have anything, so we can make sure at least once a month we have a dinner together, do a little fun date, and yeah, I have a weekend I'm on call at all 3 hospitals 5 days in a row. He knows he can go hang out with his buddies. And it helps. There's a resentment if I'm not around, and it's not like he's sitting around waiting for me and then I'm abandoning him. There's days that does happen. Don't get me wrong, or I'm supposed to go in and I go in because that's a problem I have as well. But at least we make the effort to find those golden days to make it work.
We're gonna ask one last question before we open up to the students for their Q&A. Could you share a piece of advice that you may have received as a medical student or as a resident that you still, carry with you today?
Just be prepared. I had, it's as simple as it sounds, be helpful, but don't get in the way. We want you to be there at all times, so we know you're there, but don't need to follow me to the bathroom kind of situation. Someone told me very early on, right before I started all my away rotations, know the 3 basic things. So if you're all about to go into that, know, wrist fractures, ankle fractures, hip fractures, know those classifications, because you're going to be asked at every rotation that you go to. I had a binder that every case that I went to, I made a little cheat sheet about anatomy approaches, whatever. And then that way it was literal paper. You can tell I'm not really big in technology, but that way I could take the little paper out, put it in my pocket and review it right before I went into the case. So I could be prepared for every question that was asked. Add to it every single time. I don't know where any of the papers are now because it's been thrown out and scrubbed, but I brought it with me to all my rotations in the beginning of residency. And it's something that stands out as well, because obviously you're coming prepared, you're putting forth the effort. Again, you're not going to get every question right, but if you know a lot of things, that's going to go a long way. It's just, and that doesn't change when you're a resident as well. Every case that you go into, you want to be prepared with questions. I would bring an article with me, discuss with the attending, and say, hey, I looked at this. I don't know if this is exactly what we're doing. Do these concepts apply? But at least it opens a conversation and shows that you're engaged. Without brown nosing, like, and you're learning along the way. And then they want to teach you back.
One thing someone said to me early on, which I think really stuck with me, was, in the beginning, you don't have any skills. All you have is your reputation, your work ethic and your integrity. Knowledge we can fix, skills we can fix. But, things like lying or laziness, like they're not, I can't fix that. So I that always really struck with me early on.
I have a memory of Dr. Coyle talking about how, you spend all this time learning how to do surgeries, and you kind of go into your career thinking that that's your purpose in life. But in reality, you do spend a lot of time, treating people and treating patients. And in orthopedics in particular, more so perhaps in other specialties, there are many things you can do, but they're not always things that you need to do. And so kind of having those moments when you really have to step back and say, I know I can do this, but is that really what's best for this patient? And sometimes it can be just as important. What he actually said was just that sometimes it can be just as important to decide when not to operate as it is to decide when to operate. And just kind of keeping that, I always have that voice in the back of my head.
I think the only thing that I can really remember of like something that someone told me, and this is like very specific to being a medical student, was be present but not too present, which kind of goes back to what you were saying. Like you want to be there at all times to help when needed. You want to be like prepared to do anything, whether it's like grab splint supplies, like roll a patient back. Like you want to be there, but you don't want to be. And I don't know how to describe the balance other than like you just have to like figure it out and like know it. But I remember like people telling me like when I was asking for advice about aways and like rotations and stuff, it's like be present. Like you always want to be there because like when you're not there all of a sudden and like you have something that's such a like perfect medical student task and you're not there, like that's what the people will remember about you. Not like that you were there like 99% of the time, just like waiting to do something. So you just like always want to be present, but you don't want to be like that overbearing person who's just like, oh my God, like what, or like follows you to the bathroom, or like it's like too much. And like, there's just like some delicate balance that I don't know how to quantify for you, but just to like think about it and like be ready, be prepared, like she was saying. But not too present.
Thank you. All right, students, you guys ask away.
I can ask a question. So I'm Christina, I'm an M4. And I want to thank you guys for sharing all your experiences. Hearing FM1 from women orthopedics really helped get me interested in the field, just because I found that women in orthopedics have been so open. And then obviously my experiences on OAs have solidified that. And so I wanted to ask if there's any advice you would give as someone who's nearer to residency, like strategies you use to avoid burnout and to continue to be successful throughout residency. I know we talked about time management and being prepared, but anything else specifically that you employed found helpful?
I got a dog. Yeah, that helped that
I
honestly
had a
helped.
dog when I was a resident.
That helped me. So when I was an intern, it was like during COVID. That was when it hit really hard. I was in trauma. I remember this very vividly. I was trauma. It was January. It was cold. I was on nights. I was alone and sad. I hadn't seen my now husband, boyfriend at the time, like for a long time. Like I hadn't seen sunlight. I was so depressed and it was just like miserable. And I was like, I grew up with a dog that passed away shortly before residency. And I just like I was like, I'm just gonna look through like these adoption sites. And I kept sending pictures like at midnight, 2 a.m. to my now husband. And he was like, what are you doing? Like, we can't have a dog. But then his like job became completely remote. And I was like, we're getting a dog. I'm sorry, I applied. And then we got a dog. And my quality of life, even though to be honest, like he's the primary caretaker because I'm not home most of the time. My quality of life is like what was like drastically improved. Like coming home and like having my dog who's just like so happy to see me at the end of the day. Like plan accordingly if you're gonna get a dog, guys. But
I honestly think the same core tenets, and it doesn't just apply to you as a resident. I mean, it still keeps me going on a daily basis now, is your relationships. And that can be with a partner, it can be with family, it can be with the people you work with. But that's huge. Get outside any chance you get, whether you're walking your dog, whether you're walking the 10 minutes to work, if it were dark outside. But yeah, just take those moments, go for a 30-minute walk, go for a bike ride, move your body, that's just key. And then for me, it's meals. It's like just whether it's 1 day a month or every Sunday, or just getting together and sharing meals. And my husband and I both love to cook, and that's kind of like our evening routine is, and so those are just the tenets of what helps keep me sane, I guess.
It's really important to work at that work-life balance, which I know sounds like kind of like an oxymoron, but it just won't happen by accident, and it's so important. My husband and I both really saw people at the institutions where we trained who were maybe from a different time in orthopedics, and were just gone away at conferences all the time. They're big like superstars, and like unfortunately have like some really sad family stories kind of as a result of neglecting those relationships. So we really consciously, formed our lives around making sure that we're home at certain times, trying to clear weekends to do things as a family, working at our office schedules, optimizing the efficiency so we get home for our kids. And that's been really rewarding because as much as we love our patients, like they're not going to be there for us when we're 70 to, hold our hand up.
Honestly, the get outside thing is really the key. When had the revelation as an intern that you could study outside and still be productive, that was a real game changer, as sad as that sounds. I have a hammock now in my backyard, so at least if I can get like an hour during the summer to just sit in the hammock and take a nap, that makes an abundance of difference. I got really into Orange Theory at one point in residency. I can't do that now because the cancellation policy changed and I was losing a lot of money. So I have a Peloton now that I try to get on as much as possible, but maintaining some physical activity always helps your mentals, and keeping in touch with friends, and if you have support system from medical school, those are honestly going to be some of the best people to keep in touch with, because there's not a lot of people that you grew up with maybe that are understanding what you go through. So finding the support system of the other people in this room that you can keep in touch with, share your stories with, and remind you that you're not the only one going through it, that you're not crazy. What we chose is maybe a little bit crazy, but other people are surviving and you can too.
Hi, I'm Kira. I'm an M1. I'm just curious, as somebody who's first year in medical school, and you've all gained mentees throughout the years, now attending as a resident as well. What is your advice on your experiences with people reaching out to gain mentorship, whether that was through them shadowing in a day in your practice, or whether through a cold email? What do you think really makes a good mentor-mentee relationship, especially as a first year to resident or something?
I didn't figure it out probably until now. I find that as a mentee, I'm much better at this stage of my career than I was in your position, because I was afraid that asking questions was a sign of weakness. I never wanted to impose myself on someone else, and maybe that's being a female and that's just how we're conditioned. Maybe it's the way I grew up, I don't know, but that was something that I had to, people want to help you, and you can just, don't be upset and they'll email you back right away, because I'm probably the worst at that, and our lives are crazy. But if you reach out and are a little bit persistent, as you all know, we will respond eventually. And we want to share our experiences, and we want to share our stories. I did Nth Dimensions. I don't know if you guys have heard about that. So it's for women and minorities that are interested in the field of orthopedics. They have a summer internship program between your first and second year of medical school, where they accept however many they accept now, and they place you at an institution with a mentor. So you work with them for the summer, you do a research project, you present that research at the end of the summer. So not only are you getting mentorship, but you're getting research experience, clinical experience, and that can parlay to the rest of your audition career and career in orthopedics in general. And so that was really the first experience. I was like, oh, this is a person that wants to, they volunteered to do this, they want to be in touch. When I auditioned at my residency and interviewed and said, this is the place I want to be, he happened to have been sitting on a panel with my residency director that week prior. So I called him and said, hey, I think this is it. This is a favor I want to call in. So just find the people that you have a connection with, and don't be afraid to be persistent, because things get a little bit busy, but it's worth it in the end.
One of my main mentors in residency was the residency director at the time, and he was just like, I don't pay attention to an email until I get it 3 times. So persistence does pay off. But I also think being reliable, if somebody, people will, be very busy, and probably when you do sort of get that opportunity, really jump on it and take a project that you're given and run with it, even if it's maybe not the most exciting or exactly what you're interested in. Just establishing that the ability to be responsive and reliable will get you other projects that you're more interested in maybe.
Yeah, and sometimes it can just happen more organically. It's not always emails. I mean, sometimes it's just you find out somewhere along the way that you both did the same sport and down the road, or you both were from the same hometown or something, there can just be these other connections that sometimes that can just be enough to have that relationship feel more genuine, I guess. I honestly kind of still struggle with it to some extent, because I do think ultimately just being yourself is really the key. And when it feels like you have to do all the 27 steps to get a mentee, then that sort of is not always perhaps appropriate. But
I agree. I think my best and favorite mentors throughout being a medical student and now a resident. I think the people who really stick out and were the most influential are just people I got along with.
You just
They weren't
like
even, yeah, they weren't even like necessarily in my field, although it just so happens that like my favorite person is a pediatric hand person who's like, and I'm doing hand. But like some of my other favorite people who are not even in the field, they're just people you get along with, like you talk about hobbies, like, it's just super random. So it's not just like, a part of it is definitely persistence. I think that's how I felt when I was in like well, I didn't decide it when I was in M1. I wish I knew it early. But I was like an M3, 4, like doing the rotations. I was like very persistent, like definitely lots of emails and then even texting, and just trying to like be like, hey, can I come this day? Like I'm gonna come. I like and do this and about projects. I was like always like, especially because I decided pretty late. I was like, what can I do? Like I'll literally do anything. I'll just be in the acknowledgements. I don't even care. Like I'll do any project to sort of just like be involved and like see what ortho is like. And that's definitely how it was like in the medical spheres. And then in residency, it's just like, oh, I really like you. Like we have a lot in common, like personality wise. Like you should be my mentor. I mean, we didn't have that conversation. It was more organic than that. But yeah, that's kind of how it ends up being. I think those are the best relationships and just getting like life advice from those types of people.
Hi, I'm Linda, and I'm M2. I guess my question is, have you guys ever felt guilt when you guys were not at work and spending time with your loved ones because you felt like you should
No.
be with them for work?
Yes.
Every minute of everything.
All the time.
Or like vice versa, like I mean,
Have
You're at
panic
work.
attacks because I wasn't at work.
like, how do you guys kind of work through that if you have experienced that?
I get a lot of anxiety as a resident when I'm not studying or working on research projects in my free time. We don't really have like a dedicated like weekly or monthly like research or whatever. So you have to do it in your like free time, which is I think pretty normal in residency. And I get a lot of guilt and when I'm not like studying for the OIT, which is coming up, or like, and I just kind of, I guess I allocate like I literally told my husband the other day, I was like, I will not be doing anything with you on Sunday. I'm going to be doing my research project. I'm going to finish it. And I was like, I'm gonna finish it. Like, I'm gonna finish it, like to myself, but also to him. And he knows that like, okay, I'm gonna like game with my friends like on Sunday. But I was like, but Saturday we can go to New York and like eat out. So like I'm very intentional with like like we were talking about scheduling. Like I have an Apple calendar that I share with him, so he knows when I'm on call, when I'm going to be doing this, when I'm going to be out of town, and I know what he like. Same thing with his schedule. So like I think it's just important to feel like I get carried away on that.
My superpower is I am great at compartmentalizing. And when I'm at work, and when I'm not at work, I am not at work unless I'm on call. But I am not at work. And I actually think that medicine, weirdly, because of the ways it had been designed to be able to get people to like the whole pager phase and the, like being on call, like I mean, it actually in some ways allows you to, when you're not with your patients, when you're not actively like face to face with them, there's kind of not a lot you can be done, and more so than a lot of jobs these days where, you know, I have friends who are just constantly getting, you know, work emails and work texts and group chats and they get called in to do an emergency, whatever, have to fly to Cincinnati on Sunday on short notice for this and that meeting. So, I mean, in some ways, like we do have a little more structure than a lot of other jobs do. That's not universally true, but it has been kind of historically that way.
Getting away from work is a little bit harder for me because I married an ortho trauma surgeon.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That sounds really nice, though. But I have to say, after all the years of busting my butt now with 2 kids, it's hard to remember feeling guilty about not being at work. So you have that to look forward to.
That's so beyond my capacity of understanding right now. You know, what I do, alluding to what Dr. Roberts said, is that, you know, with trauma and my brand of adult reconstructive surgery is periprosthetic fracture and infection. So it's, you know, joint practice with a trauma lifestyle, and we've chose to work in a very large tertiary referral center. So it doesn't really matter if you're on call or getting transfers all the time. So there is no completely turning it off, except if you go out of the country, although that didn't work either, so I'm getting calls at 4 AM in what European time. Because there was a patient of mine that showed up in a hospital with a wound complication, they wanted to know why I wasn't gonna come there, so you can try, but that's just the nature of medicine, and hopefully you find a practice that's built in for you to have coverage, reliable call service, things like that. But if you have passion for what you do and you have passion for your patients, it's hard to completely let go, and I think that just means that you care about your job, and again, as you get more secure in your position and more comfortable with your practice and more established and understand that people trust you and they're not gonna think less of you because you took 3 hours to go to the movies. You'll figure it out eventually.
Another question over there. I'm Karen, I'm also fourth year. I didn't you talk about why Ortho, but when and why did you choose like a subsidy?
So at that, the instant veterans internship that I did actually kind of put me on that track. So I'm perhaps one of the rare people. I knew I wanted to do orthopedics in high school. Basically, my whole talk is find experiences of things that you might be interested in, because those experiences can really shape you. So I did one of those like national youth leadership forum things that you used to get in the mail, and my parents were like, sure, why not? And I said, okay. So I did national youth leadership forum in medicine. And at that point, I didn't know if I like had the stomach to be a surgeon, and they took us to a medical school, and we went to a cadaver lab and had all the pro sections. And this is really sweet. I think I could do this. And then it was all ortho from there on out. And you know, for better, for worse, part of the reason I'm here is because I'm bullheaded and stubborn, and so I just never changed my mind after that. But when I did have dimensions, I was paired with a trauma surgeon down in University of Mississippi, and just I thought I was going to do sports because I thought scopes were cool and athletes were cool, and then I said I don't want to do that at all. I want to do these big open things. I want to sling the mallet around. This is a blast. And again, because of stubborn and bullheaded, that was between my first and second year of medical school, and then I never changed my mind. So, but again, be open. You can seek experiences early in your medical career.
I didn't decide all that early, maybe like in the third year or something, but like, you really do need to be open as you go through your rotations, because you honestly it's frustrating as an attending to get someone who like has just decided they're doing joints and don't care about anything, but you'll use those skills in in other rotations and whatever you do. And also, like, you just never know what you'll end up liking. And a lot of times you go into something that maybe you didn't think you would initially like because you find a really great mentor, Mentors, I think every mentor really can shape what you go into. So I decided on hand sometime third year, because I really like the breadth of cases. I feel like I'm sounding like I have ADD. I don't want to be in a, like a 10-hour spine case. But I do like 100 different cases. I'm still doing peds. I'm still doing trauma. I'm still doing joints. I'm still doing sports. I do a little bit of plastic flaps. I do a little bit of like spine with all my nerve surgeries. So I have this like incredible breadth of cases that I'm doing. And what's kind of exciting, but a little bit scary, is that I'm still doing cases that I've never done before, because you just cannot do all of hand in your training. So I have to, I have to read and prepare for my cases, like call on my, colleagues who have done those cases for tips and tricks, and just sort of rely on my skills to get through sometimes.
Yeah, same. I was not totally decided. I always had an interest in sports. As I went through residency, I always really liked peds a lot, except I hated spine. So I didn't really know how to reconcile those two things in my brain. And had applied and decided to do sports, but then was approached by the peds group here saying that they really wanted a peds person that did sports. So it worked out for me to do some additional peds training kind of more after the fact. So my job opportunity actually kind of helped shape some of my training as well.
So I am only a fifth year resident, so I haven't done my subspecialty, but I'm gonna be I'm going into hand and upper extremity at Pitt next year. And what drew me, I realized at the end of my second year rotation, so we do our rotations, we basically rotate through everything by the end of your third year, which is your end of your juniorship, which is good because then you start applying the following year. So you've done everything for 4 months at least by that time point. And after I finished my hand rotation at the end of my second year was when I realized I really wanted to do hand for exactly the same reasons. It's like you do a little bit of everything in ortho, like arthroplasty, you do sports, you do peds, like you do whatever you want. And I wanted to do full upper extremity because then you could do like shoulder replacements and shoulder scopes and rotator cuff repairs and stuff. So for all of those reasons is why I applied upper extremity.
But I do think you still need some plasticity to it all, because sometimes, I mean, even when you're in a job for a while, or maybe you move and you get a new job, and maybe that group wants somebody who does what you do, but also really, the last person that did that job also did this, and so can you do that as well? And even if it's not something that you thought you knew how to do, like maybe you do get a little extra somewhere along the way. And I think that the group that you end up joining, the hospital that you end up joining, whatever your work environment is and kind of what their needs are, sometimes ends up dictating what you end up doing. So even if you have this very set idea of, well, I did this was my fellowship, this is who I am, sometimes that's still fluid.
And you're gonna have to take call.
Yes.
With the exception of Cannon's 5, you're gonna have to take call.
If not, I'll ask one more. What is the coolest surgery you guys have ever done?
I have to say some of the tumor stuff I did as a resident are still
I was gonna say,
just like
this was
burned and etched into my memory.
one of the coolest things I was a part of. Oh, actually, no, I have two answers. Both are upper extremity. One was a tumor case. We did this like crazy resection of this lady who had a completely like neglected squamous cell carcinoma of her hand that had basically just like eaten away her entire like radial side of her hand, and we resected her thumb, index, and long fingers. She basically just had like 2 fingers. She probably should have had like a trans radius, but she was like completely resistant. I can't believe that she let her hand go on for that long. It had been going on for, it was like rotting off of her. We did that, so that was cool. We did that at Sloan Kettering for our operation. And then I did a policization last year with our pediatric hand surgeon, which was probably the coolest thing, like creating a thumb. Coolest thing you'll ever see. Oh my God. Thank God I'm going into him. So
Yeah, and as a med student, I remember seeing, it was still tumor stuff, but in the pediatric patients, just some of the reconstructions and, yeah, those are wild.
Yeah, I was gonna say time between brachial plexus and policization. Those are both pretty wild and amazing because of those things.
I had a guy that came from Honduras that had a proximal femur non-union, a subtrope malunion, and obviously it was all infected, of course, so we had to correct the malunion, do a primary spacer of his hip, then converted him to a revision type 12 hip arthroplasty, and now we're currently doing limb lengthening with an internal lengthening device, so that he has a functional limb instead of weird little chicken leg that he's been walking around with a crutch for 5 years. Wow. I like my job because you can be a Frankenstein and really get to break people down and build them back up. That's the fun side of this weird trauma infection joint thing that we've created. That's my plug for that. The new night subspecialty.
So if no more questions, we're gonna end our panel. Let's give our panelists. For joining us tonight, thank you guys for joining us as well, and to those on Zoom. You're welcome. So we're done for tonight.
Thank you both. You both did a great job.
yeah.